Hey, welcome to Mineral Talks Live, the weekly live webinar that brings you in-depth and in-person interviews with the mineral people from around the world. Mineral Talks Live is brought to you by a joint effort among the Mineralogical and Geological Museum at Harvard University, the Society of Mineral Museum Professionals, and BlueCap Productions. Tune in every Wednesday and stay connected to your mineral world. Now, broadcasting live from beautiful Honolulu, Hawaii, the land of aloha, ukuleles, and shakas, this is Mineral Talks Live. Hello and welcome to another episode of Mineral Talks Live. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Brian Sabota, president of BlueCap Productions, and I'm looking forward to doing another great interview for the mineral collecting world. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, Mineral Talks Live is a new program that BlueCap Productions is doing in conjunction with Raquel Alonso Perez from the Mineralogical and Geological Museum of Harvard University and Dr. Eloise Gaillou from the Society of Mineral Museum Professionals. The three of us were chatting one time, and we recognized that in light of this COVID-19 situation that was causing a lot of disruption in the mineral collecting field with our remain at home orders and the ban on traveling and the cancellation of many of the great mineral shows. We felt that there might be a real need for the mineral collecting world to connect in a new way online that hadn't been done before. And so we started thinking about a live broadcast. Actually, Raquel and Eloise were pushing me for a live broadcast, and I was resisting because I just wasn't comfortable with that. And, you know, with BlueCap Productions, it was always about production value, and I didn't feel that the quality of the videos would be good enough for what I was used to putting out. But after attending a few other webinars, Raquel and Eloise really kind of convinced me that right now it's about content and less about the perfection of the image. And so they were 100% right. And so we finally kind of put together the show and broadcasting this. This is coming out every week, every Wednesday. And we'll be talking to all different people in the mineral collecting field, from collectors to show promoters to dealers to curators to artists to everybody we can involved in the mineral collecting world, and even expanding a little bit beyond that, but still kind of in our world. So the format of the show is that I sit down with a guest for about 30 minutes and we do kind of a back and forth interview. The way that you guys can interact with the guest is two different ways. They're at the bottom of your Zoom window. If you move your mouse down there, a little pop-up menu will come up, and you will have the ability to participate in the chat room, or you can also, there's also a Q&A session. Now, the chat room is something where you can interact with all the other people watching this and with the panelists, but our guest and myself, while we have access to that, we probably won't really be looking at the chat window because we're just going to be focusing on the conversation with each other. However, Raquel and Eloise are going to be manning the chat rooms, and so they'll be interacting with you there. And they're also doing all the technical stuff that really makes this show possible. So they're doing all the heavy lifting. I'm just sitting here being a somewhat hairy face in front of the camera. Another way that you can interact is there is a Q&A at the bottom of the screen also, and that's going to be for the second half of the show. That's really going to be about 10 to 15 minutes at the end, where you can type your questions in there, and those questions would be either directed to our guest or myself, hopefully our guest, just because I don't have a lot of terribly interesting things to say. But during the Q&A session, Eloise and Raquel will be reading out those questions, and you'll get the answers to your questions live. So that's the way that it's going to go. We're going to try our best to keep this to about 45 minutes. We may go a little bit over, as we usually do, just because once we start getting into that conversation, it gets so interesting. I think all of you that go to the mineral shows, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So we're going to get going with our interview pretty soon. We've got a whole bunch of people logging in from all over the place. We were talking earlier, we've got Sammy Mackey coming in from India. We got Patrick Dreyer coming in from Idar Oberstein. We've got a whole bunch of people coming in from kind of the Tucson and Phoenix area. I think Los Angeles was in there. Let me just take a look at this window, see who else we have in here. We got some people from Texas in here.
We have England, San Francisco, Morocco,
England,
South Africa.
Seattle.
So it's truly a global program that we're putting on here, and we really want to thank all of you for joining us today. Okay, and so with that, as you all know, our guest today is Mr. Peter Megaw. Those of you who know anything about the TGMS show know of Peter. He is the exhibit chair for the TGMS show, and so he's the one who's responsible for putting together all those fantastic exhibits that you see every year at the main show. He's also probably one of the world's top Mexican mineral collectors, and author, contributor to a lot of the major magazines out there, and really happy to that one of the co-hosts of What's Hot in Tucson. He joined in 2020, and we're going to see some of his stuff really soon because What's Hot in Tucson will be coming out very shortly. So with that, Peter, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Brian. Delighted to be here.
Wonderful. Well, I know so many people know so much about your background. What a lot of people may not know is a little bit of history that led up to where you are right now. And I know that you started mineral collecting back in 1977 when you were a grad student. And my understanding is you were studying volcanology. And a couple of your classmates said, "Hey, Peter, let's go down to Mexico. There's this little place called Santa Eulalia that we'd like to go down and look for minerals." And you agreed with, I think, about $12 in your pocket. And when you came back from Mexico, you had $0 in your pocket, but you had 3 shoeboxes full of minerals. So unravel that story for our viewers, if you would.
Well, I was, that's mostly right. I was in the middle of trying to select my master's thesis field area for my geology studies. I was working as I was studying volcanology, and the area I was looking at was immediately south of Chihuahua City, and I was down with a couple of other guys who had field areas just west of there, and they had been in and out of Chihuahua for, I don't know, 10 years probably, for various things. One of them had done his thesis on the geode locality just north of Chihuahua. And so they invited me to go with them out to Santa Eulalia. And as you say, I was down to $12 in my wallet, and wandered around Santa Eulalia with my eyes like dinner plates. And this one bartender had some very nice little shoe boxes, $4 a piece, with nice little specimens. And so I bought them all.
Fantastic. It's one of those stories that it's like you only just hear about, but you don't really believe maybe that they're 100% true.
Well, and the follow-up to it, as I got back to school, semester started, and a guy named Ed Huskinson, who many people know, came in to the doctoral program at that point to run the Barron collection, which was actually the mineral collection donated to the University of Texas at Austin, which is where Pete Keller got his start working with specimens. And he'd been an intern at the Smithsonian or something like that, but he was the only one in the department who knew anything about specimens, so they gave him that job. He finished. Ed came in. Ed said to me, we'd met once or twice before, and he said, they're sending me to Tucson show in a couple of weeks. Do you want to go? And I said, sure. What's the Tucson show? And he explained to me what the Tucson show was, and I came out and wandered around again with my eyes the size of dinner plates. I had no idea that there were more mineral specimens in the world than would be absorbed by mineral museums. I thought that's sort of where they all went. I had no idea that there were more than the museums could handle, or that it was actually possible for people to put together a collection themselves.
Well, that is incredible, because we think of you and we associate you so well with Tucson, and at this time you hadn't even heard of Tucson. When did you actually make the move to Tucson?
Well, I finished my master's in early '79, just in time for of course, the first show was '77. I was immediately hooked. I was at the show in '77. I had to choose between a job in Denver and a job in Tucson starting in early '79. For some strange reason, I took Tucson, which was actually good because that was in silver and gold as opposed to molybdenum, and the molybdenum market cratered about 6 months later. So I was in Tucson, joined TGMS very quickly, and some of the older members of TGMS, like Bill and Millie Shoup, decided that they were going to get me more involved in the show. So before I knew it, I was on the board of the society, being asked to be president of the society, being asked if I would do exhibits and all of this stuff. And I'm going, but aren't there people in the society who wanted these positions for a long time? And I've since learned that volunteer organizations don't really work like that. So I got the job as exhibits chair in '85 or '86, and I've been doing it ever since.
Wow, a choice between Denver or Tucson. It's almost as if the mineral world was calling out for you.
Yeah, although I had no idea that the Denver show even existed at that point.
Incredible. Now, your one area of focus for you is a place called Santa Eulalia. And in fact, you actually wrote a 180-page article on it for the Mineralogical Record. This was back in 2018. This is an excellent article, and this has now become, I think, volume 8 in their Mexico series. What is it about Santa Eulalia that has kind of captured your passion?
Well, that again goes back to Huskinson and follow-up trips for my master's thesis, because one of the things I recognized at the Tucson show was that it was potentially possible to pay for going to university by buying minerals and selling minerals. Being recorded. And so my thesis area was right across the highway from Santa Eulalia, so every 4 or 5 days I would go out there and buy some minerals. And being a geologist, I was curious about mining, and I started digging into it and realized that most of the literature on the district at that point was about 30 years old. And the more I dug into it, the more I realized this is pretty interesting stuff. And I started actually working with deposits like that through the job I had at the time. Decided I'm tired of working for idiots. I want to be my own idiot. If I want to work for myself, if I have a problem with the boss, I want that to be a very personal problem. And so I went to the company that owned the mines there and said, I want to do a doctorate here. And they said, fine. And so I then spent 8 years building a consulting business and studying Santa Eulalia, everything from mapping the entire mountain range down to looking at the age dates and sulfur isotopes and all kinds of esoteric stuff like that.
Wow. So you really at heart are a geologist. And I think a lot of people are more familiar with another Mexican locale that's not too far away called Eulalia. And I think they're very similar geologically, yet you have all kinds of different minerals coming from the different locations. Explain that to us a little bit.
Well, Santa Eulalia, Eulalia, San Pedro Corralitos, Los Lamentos, Charcas, San Martin, these are all members of the same family, or San Carlos, which has gotten a bunch of cool stuff out in the last year or two. They're carbonate replacement deposits. That's the backbone of the Mexican underground mining business. And they're a fascinating deposit type. They actually occur all over the world. So places like Dalmagorsk and some of these things in China, like Yaogangshan are members of that family. A lot of the deposits like Trepcha in Eastern Europe, Lavrion, places like that. For some reason, I've got a poll that's popped up in front of me that it's not allowing me to vote in, but it's commandeered my screen.
Oh, go ahead. I think there's a X in the upper right-hand corner. You can close it out.
No, I'm not finding that X. Okay,
to our viewers, that is the Know Your Peter Megaw poll, and Peter will head into the show.
Okay. Maybe if I skip all the way to the end of all these. Anyway, these deposits are best developed in Mexico. And, you know, I got fascinated with them. I've now studied them all over the world. I explore for these on a routine basis. And, you know, the mineralogical differences in terms of what we see, especially manifested in the oxide minerals, which is what Ohuela is best known for, has a lot to do with the primary mineral composition of the deposits. Ohuela has about 18% arsenopyrite mixed with the pyrite, galena, and sphalerite, which are the main ore minerals. And so when that oxidizes, you make a whole bunch of cool arsenate minerals. And because the ore bodies there are essentially vertical tubes, all that oxidation happens in sort of a vertical zoning pattern as the fluids infiltrate. You just get one stacked set of conditions stacked on top of another after another as you work your way down, very much like Tsumeb, which is geometrically similar and has a different genesis, but a lot of overlap with the geology of these things. Eulalia is more horizontally oriented, and it's not until you get in the southern part of the district that the arsenopyrite starts to come up, and that's where you start to pick up the mimetite and the legrandite and some of the other arsenates that are present at Eulalia, but much less well known than they are from Ohuela, for example.
Well, Peter, I know that one of the things that you really love about minerals is the provenance, or the history of the minerals. Explain to us why that is so important to you.
Well, it starts from being a geologist, and because I'm a geologist, I care about the geologic context of the minerals. So, you know, a mineral that doesn't tell me anything about where it's from doesn't do a lot for me. So I tend to focus on the geologic context, the locality, and, you know, when you start studying a locality, especially in a place like Mexico, which has multiple hundreds of years of mining history, you get caught up in the history and the development and the exploration and the people around the minerals and around the mining camps. And then you start looking at the people around the mineral specimens, and the longer you spend in this passion that we have, the more interesting people you meet and the more people you care about. So you start thinking, well, you know, I care about the fact that Miguel Romero used to own this rock, or I care about the fact that this used to be in the Harvard collection. And so that becomes an important component aspect of the specimen. And a lot of this has been fed by visiting museums all over the world and helping them sort out their Mexican materials, some of which are less well labeled than others. I mean, my first time at the Natural History Museum in London, I was faced with 2 tables covered with Mexican specimens, most of which had been bought from me at Tucson. Someone get all the locality information off the labels when they resold them to the Natural History Museum, and all it said was, you know, this mineral, Eulalia, Chihuahua, and it no longer had the stope and mine names and things like that attached to it. So it's just something that comes along with it, and you know, you can't buy a new mineral every day, so you got to pay some attention to the free stuff that comes along with it.
Well, I think that's very acute. A lot of things that we resonate with are the people stories, and what you're saying is basically you love the people stories associated with the minerals. Now, hopefully in the far, 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 far future, someone may have a little rhodochrosite from the Peter Megaw collection that happened to be your your first specimen that you collected. Do you still have that piece with you in your collection?
I do. It's probably the least exciting specimen on exhibit in my mineral room, but it's
least exciting in terms of how it looks, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're nice little crystals of rhodochrosite, but it's a far cry from some of the things I've acquired since then.
I'm sure, but I love the fact that it was your first specimen. Can you take us into your vault and show us that piece?
I can do that.
Great.
Is that where we're going?
That's where we're going now.
Okay. Okay, so to do that, I have to turn my camera around.
There we go. Nice fingernails.
Figure out how to keep my fingers away from the camera. So as you can see, I also have a thing for books. And
why does it say "Abandon all hope" above the doorway there?
And rock and roll posters. And now let's work our way down to Santa Eulalia. There's 7 banks of minerals. 3 of them are devoted to Santa Eulalia. And this one is devoted to the West Camp. I have everything organized geologically. So we're looking at oxide minerals at the top, working our way down through the supergene zone at the base of the oxides, and then down into the primary minerals, and the rhodochrosite qualifies in that department. So this whole shelf is from it's a single ore body. It's a big ore body, but all this rhodochrosite is from the same ore body. And that little specimen right there was
one in the middle.
No, the little one right in front.
Oh, okay.
So it's a small miniature, and it was one of the things in those 3 shoe boxes that I bought.
Well, there's the provenance right there. I imagine that people are going to have to pry that out of the cold dead hands of Lauren to get that in their collection.
Yeah, I think that's quite likely.
So, Peter, which of your pieces, either mineral deal or acquisition, means the most to you?
Well, that's like asking which is my favorite child, and that's very difficult. I mean, there's a lot of pieces that resonate and have stories behind them, like the blue smithsonites from the San Antonio mine that I just happened to wind up in the right place at the right time. The guy I bought a lot of rocks from had just bought this entire lot. He had called a dealer from the U.S. who was supposed to come down and buy it, but he couldn't get him any money, and he had to pay the people who dug it right away. And I was able to give him enough money right away to get to high grade the lot. So that was fun. When I was working at Santa Eulalia one Sunday afternoon, the phone rang up in what they called the hotel, which was the bachelor quarters for the mine. And it was one of the local dealers who was starting to suffer from rheumatoid arthritis. And he asked me if I could come down to his place in town and help him unpack. And so I gleefully went down to do that. He'd just been to NICA that day and had come back with a bunch of stuff from there. And as I helped him unpack, that octahedron came out, as well as the Spinel twin on one side of it, and the calcite that looks like it's carved out of styrofoam on the other side. And I paid the princely sum of $85 for those specimens and about 8 more. So that was a lot of fun. Now I've got an adamite that probably everybody in the world has seen a picture of, because Jeff Scoville took a picture of it about 3 years ago, and it's been in his ad almost ever since. Just a nice piece from Ohuela. You mentioned that earlier. You might think I have a thing for adamite, which is true. And you talk about provenance, that purple adamite there in the middle was Miguel Romero's.
Oh, right on.
So,
Those are great.
And then, of course, I love Milpillas, which is sort of the modern classic Mexican locality, actually arguably the best locality for azurite anywhere in the world. And the word came out, I guess, last Friday that Milpillas is closed for good. So there won't be any more material coming out of there.
And this is the final actual word. We've heard rumors of this before, but now it's officially confirmed that Milpillas is no more. This
was a press release from the company, the Peñoles company that operates the mine, that was it.
And this to me is one of the great modern examples of opportunity, because when it first started coming out, everybody was saying now is the time to get Milpillas because this won't last forever and someday it will be an absolute classic. And, in actually just a few short years, we've seen that come to fruition.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could tell based on the size of the resource and the mining rate, you could figure out how long they were going to be in production, and they actually managed to stay in production about 3 years longer than they thought. But they're done now. And that's a Legrandite from the type locality. Again, that was in Miguel Romero's collection. And you might think I have a bit of a thing for the fluorite on Celestine from Coahuila from El Tule. That would be correct. I love Cerro de Mercado and the apatites and the martite, the hematite pseudomorphs after octahedral magnetite. I collected about 800 kilos of them one afternoon.
Wow.
That was a lot of fun. And of course, being a silver exploration geologist and having found the western half of the Fresnillo district, I care a lot about silver minerals from Fresnillo. And so I put together a nice little suite of those. Probably the star being that acanthite right there in the middle with the beautiful sort of hoppered or skeletal texture.
I love that. Could you get a little closer into that, or do you have glass?
I can, but I have to open the door.
Oh, okay, never mind that.
But I did. I opened the door. Now I got to get my fingers out of the way.
That is fantastic. I love that hoppered growth there.
And it's probably hard to see, but on the bottom and on the sides are nice little hexagonal course. There's Guanajuato with beautiful native silvers, a big acanthite that used to be Miguel's. And if you like silver minerals and weird things, then
the black uglies, as they say.
Boleo, that's a nice little 2.5 centimeter
We're there.
This meeting is being recorded. Picture in the background. But the first summer I was at Santa Eulalia, we got into a really nice pocket of hemimorphite, so I collected a bunch of those.
Mind if I continue asking a few questions from the...
Sure, go right ahead.
Because I have a question here that I would love for you to answer. Someone, George Adelman, is asking that your displays don't seem to show labels. So do you keep the caption somewhere? How do you do to actually order your collection?
Well, I have a catalog of my collection, and my camera is on mirror for some reason at the moment, but each case is labeled. And I find that probably 90% of the people who see my collection are interested in a visual experience, and labels sort of interfere with that. And of the 10% of the people who see the collection who are actually collectors, 8% of them understand what most things are and aren't afraid to ask. And the other 2% understand what things are and are afraid to ask if they don't recognize them.
Peter, how do you have your collection organized? It looks like by locale, but then how is it organized shelf by shelf?
Well, for example, Eulalia, this whole bank from top to bottom, these 5 shelves, that's all Eulalia. And essentially this shelf is copper and lead minerals. That's all zinc arsenates, so it's adamite with a few austenites thrown in just for good measure. This is all secondary supergene zinc minerals, so hemimorphite, fluorite, rosacite, things like that. And then the ones on the bottom are too big to go anywhere else, so that's why they wind up down on the bottom. I don't discriminate on the basis of size, so I collect everything from micros to giant rocks, and I also, I focus on the rarities. I mean, the top shelf here are all various kinds of rarities from Eulalia. So I was fortunate when I got half of Miguel's collection to get his type specimen or co-type specimen of Eulalia and his co-type specimen of mapimite. So I go for a lot of the rarities as well as the really attractive stuff. For many people, they have to get up on a little bit of a step stool to see what's on this shelf, but it's actually at a comfortable eye level for me.
Yeah, well, you're 8'3", I think.
Getting there. And then in terms of Eulalia, as I mentioned before, it's organized essentially like an oxidation profile.
Okay.
From the oxide zone down through the primary zone with the sulfides and the ludlamites and fluorites and things like that, and then down to sulfides and quartzes and things like that coming from the deep primary zone.
Now, Peter, as you acquire new minerals, how do you determine what goes out of your collection and what happens to those pieces that go out?
Well, the first thing that happens to them is they get demoted to a drawer. And so I have cabinets with drawers full of specimens, and they sit there for a while until it seems like I don't need them, or I got 4 or 5 more things that join that particular group, and I trade them off. I'll sell them off. I will be contributing about 100, a little more than 100 specimens to the exhibits at the new University of Arizona Mineral Museum.
Oh, right on. We're excited to see that open.
I'm in charge of putting the Mexican exhibit together for some reason.
Random choice, I'm sure.
So you talk about provenance. Here's a really interesting specimen. This is a native silver from Autopelis. Okay. That was collected. There's 2 of them there. One is the bat, which is a very obvious Nueva Nevada mine reticulated specimen. But this one was
Murciélago.
Pardon?
El Murciélago.
El Murciélago, yes. But then this one was collected in 1825. It was in the collection of a gentleman named Joel Roberts Poinsett for whom the poinsettia is named, because he brought that back from Mexico with him. He was the U.S. envoy to Mexico from 1825 to 1835. And if you read his journal, he talked about how difficult it was to get decent specimens in Mexico City. And so he then talks about riding a mule for 3 days to Guanajuato, where he acquired a series of decent specimens, including that acanthite on quartz. He was a member of the American Philosophical Society. His collection was donated or incorporated into the Philadelphia Academy collection back in about 1850, something like that. And ultimately, when that collection was dispersed, that group of pieces plus some other things came out. And this native silver was actually one of 6 specimens that were sent to him by people trying to put the Batopilas district back into production. And they weren't asking him to promote it or anything. They were just asking him to say that the specimens they sent him were high-grade silver specimens. And I was able to track down the transmission document for this group of specimens, which was held in, of all places, Washington on the Brazos University in Texas in their rare books collection. And it describes the 5 ore samples that they sent him, and they say, and for your collection, we're sending you this crystallized silver specimen. And from the description of that, plus the numbers, it is quite clear that that is the piece. So this is a much older and very different style of native silver than you're used to seeing from Batopilas.
I love it. It's like a whole detective story right there in your vault.
So I have another question as well coming in. Do you have any luminescence display, fluorescence display?
I have fluorescence. I don't have a fluorescent exhibit. What I'm probably best known for is the daylight fluorescing or luminescing opal from the state of Zacatecas. There's a piece of it back there with the boltwood. It's actually on boltwoodite in this particular case, this big ball. And if we took that specimen out into shaded sunlight, you would see the color on it explode because of the daylight luminescent properties of it containing a tiny amount of uranyl, uranium at a sub radioactive level, but it makes for a very, very attractive gemstone and specimen material. Let's see if we can quickly make that work. Excellent. So here are some faceted stones.
Oh wow, you can just watch them glow as you're stepping out.
Yeah, now any kind of filter like glass will filter out the rays that you need to make the fluorescence work or the luminescence work. But out here in the shaded sunlight,
jeez, look at that.
You can get a feel for how gorgeous they are. Now the set of 4 is a graduated set showing the range of luminescence. And then these 3 are probably the most violently luminescent specimens that we got so far. And kudos to Mike Gray for doing a beautiful job of faceting this stuff. Apparently it's not easy. It has tubes in it because it overgrew spicules of boltwoodite and uranospinite, and those tubes are now empty inside the opal. And when you're polishing it, the grit can get into those tubes, and once it's in, you basically can't get it out anymore.
Wow. Now that's a good segue into fluorescent minerals. I know the show theme for next year's Tucson show is fluorescent minerals. And as we were discussing earlier in the program, you are the exhibits chair, and that is a volunteer position. And there is an extraordinary amount of work that goes into putting that together. For the viewers out there that may have never been to the Tucson show, or maybe haven't ever been to a major mineral show, can you describe to us why that's important for you and why it's important for the mineral collecting world?
Well, I mean, part of the reason we're doing fluorescence is that this is the 50th anniversary of the formation of the Fluorescent Mineral Society. And we did a fluorescent show for their 25th anniversary 24 years ago, and it was extremely successful and very well received, and fluorescents have become a little bit more better accepted in the community, let's put it that way, since then. So we're looking forward to what they can do. But it's also important to emphasize that that's not the only theme for the show next year. We have a co-theme, which is apatite group minerals. So we can bring in things like mimetite and pyromorphite and all of the, I guess, probably hundreds of species that fall within the apatite supergroup. So for people who want to see color and crystals and things in daylight, that will be the theme. And then there'll be the fluorescent exhibits, probably about 60 or 70 of them. And some of the apatites fluoresce, so there will be a link between the two.
Gotcha. Now, in terms of the Tucson show, we've had the Sainte Marie show canceled. We just recently had the Denver show canceled. We're all kind of hoping for the best when it comes to Munich. And some people feel that the Tucson show might be affected. Now, the Tucson show, and when I say Tucson show, I mean all 52 shows that go on in that 4-week period in Tucson. That is 10 times larger than the next biggest mineral show, which is the Munich show, and brings in well over $100 million into revenue into the city of Tucson for that period. What are your thoughts on what might happen next year in regards to the Tucson show because of COVID-19? Do you have any kind of thoughts that you can share with us?
Well, there's a lot of thoughts on that whole subject. I mean, first and foremost is that we hope that the danger of COVID transmission has dropped to an insignificant level by that point, so that we can safely hold the show. We are planning as if we are going to have a show. The ultimate decision of whether we do or not is in the hands of the board of directors of the Tucson Gem and Mineral Society, and that will be based on whether or not it is safe and what kind of restrictions the Tucson Convention Center might put on us. And probably from a commercial standpoint will depend to some degree on what some of the satellite shows choose to do. But it's important to highlight the fact that there's 52 shows. There is no umbrella organization or any person or government entity who has a control over the entire event. So there could well be cancellation of some, while some are still happening. We just don't know yet.
Well, we're going to keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best. Peter, we're getting close to the end of the interview section, and we're going to go on to the Q&A. But first, I got a couple of requests. If you can show us a couple of pieces. Just not too long ago, you had your camera on a specimen that was growing inside of what looked like a metal pipe, which is a real oddity. And then you have another one that's like a crystallized snake skeleton. I know that a lot of people are interested in that. Tell us about those.
I know that Eulalia is especially interested in having me show that. So this two shelves here are from Nika. And Nika, of course, everybody knows of the Cave of the Giants. And Nika actually pumps an enormous amount of water, which is saturated with calcium sulfate. And
Peter, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. I think your finger might be blocking your microphone.
My finger might be blocking my microphone.
Okay. Well, it might be just the connection. You sound like you're talking from within that piece of pipe there, but at least I think we can hear you going. Sorry.
Mica, the water's full of calcium sulfate. It comes out of the walls or is pumped at about 55 degrees C. As it drops down to about 52 degrees C, gypsum starts to crystallize, and it crystallizes everywhere, including in all of the pump infrastructure. And this is a piece that came from Miguel's collection, and that is actually a brass fitting from the pipe string in which a attractive little group of gypsum crystals grew. So you have things that grew naturally, like the one I'm showing now, or this little group here. But the miners throw trash into the sumps where the water is accumulated. And so you'll see gypsum crystals growing on pieces of wood, on pieces of brattice cloth, all kinds of crazy places.
I love those.
So here you are. There's the. It's not a crystallized snake skeleton. This is from what we call a shrinkage cave. This forms at the top of an oxidized ore body. As the ore body's oxidized, you wind up flushing material out, so you wind up with an open void in which a raglanite grows, and some of them are connected to the surface. And in this particular case, a snake either crawled or was washed in during a storm, passed away, largely disintegrated, and then was progressively covered by a ragonite sort of cave-type formation. If you look closely, you can see the ribs where they disarticulated and came off of the vertebrae, which is the most obvious thing that you can see on the specimen.
That is absolutely.
And for those who care about fluorescence, this fluorescence is a very ghostly sort of bluish green.
Fantastic. That is absolutely fantastic. Hey, Peter, I'm going to ask you a question that I like to ask everybody. In your opinion, what makes a great specimen? What are the qualities of a specimen that makes it great?
Well, first of all, it belongs to me. The prime category, and that, of course, would mean it would have to be from Mexico. But all joking aside, and this is one of the things that I again have to acknowledge Ed Huskinson for bringing me to the realization of, or teaching me when I was just starting out in this business, is well-formed crystals, good color, aesthetic display of the crystal so that the specimen sits up and basically makes a work of art all by itself. So, and obviously perfection, freedom from dings or wilburs or whatever you want to call damage. So perfection, crystal size, color, and the most difficult, most subjective, and most important is the aesthetics of the specimen.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Peter, thank you so much. We're going to transition, as usual, we're a little bit over our time, but we're going to transition into our Q&A session right now. I see we've got quite a few questions that people want to know about, and so I'm going to turn it over to Eloise and Raquel, and hopefully you can hang around and answer some of these questions.
I'm happy to do that. My one question is I'm seeing some people are saying the sound is cutting in and out, and I'm wondering if that's because I'm in the mineral vault. And, if that is the case, I can either get close to the door or...
No, you're good. Peter, okay. You're back. You are good to go. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So then Eloise and Raquel, why don't you go ahead and go through some of the questions that our viewers have.
Can I ask my own personal ones? Sure. No, just joking. There is one from Alan Hart, which I think is quite interesting. He said, you have overseen and developed some of the greatest displays of minerals ever seen at the Tucson show, and he would like to know which one has been your favorite ones to look back and go, oh, yes. And don't say your children. We know we cannot choose between our children, but which ones you think has been the best? You have enjoyed the most?
The best, the one I enjoy most of my children?
No, the shows you have organized.
Well, I mean, for shows, the one I probably enjoyed the most was the year Mexico was the theme. And as far as exhibits that I enjoy the most, I love locality exhibits. And I've been really pleased when the Natural History Museum has brought spectacular examples of, suites of things from Cornwall, or Harvard has brought things from New England. And, when the museums play to their strength with the locality theme that I like, or the context that I like to see, those are the cases I like the most. I mean, I love the big knockout crystals, giant tanzanites and imperial topaz and things like that. But to me, the ones that matter are the ones that highlight the mineralogy of a locality in a broad sense. So the pretties as well as the uglies, with good attention paid to where they come from and why they come from there.
Nice one. We have another one from Salina Sermon. She asked, she's just starting to collect minerals, and her question is, where should I start? And is there a website?
Well, there's a million websites. That's the problem. Where you should start is with what attracts you. Collect for yourself. Don't collect for what you think other people will be impressed by your having. Obviously, you have to play to your pocketbook. So buy the fewest number of really good specimens that you can for your money. So the basic idea is buy one really good rock as opposed to 10 not so good rocks. And, get out and meet people, let people know what you like and what sort of things you collect for, because a lot of the dealers in this business really pay attention to what they know collectors like. So if they know you like Mexico, sometimes you get an early call when something is available. And as Carl Francis pointed out a couple of years ago, one of the most important and most difficult aspects of collecting to work with is the time factor, that you have to understand that you have to see what comes out over 30 or 40 years or 20 years before you really have a good idea of what the best things are that ever came out. Visit museums. It doesn't cost you anything. You can't take the rocks home anyway. But educate yourself on the internet, subscribe to all the mineral magazines, and I mean all the mineral magazines, and go to shows. And once you have enough rocks, exhibit at shows, because you could be a little bit hesitant to do that, but you learn so much doing it, and other people make comments, people find out what you like, they come to you and say, boy, I've got a rock that would work really well in your collection. And those are the kinds of contacts and interconnections that you make over time that you just can't beat. And you can really see the effect of this over a long period of time if you look at the world's major museums and you look at the collections that they acquired, and you look at things that were brought in under the aegis of a given curator who focused on something, and they make an indelible stamp on the museum over a long period of time by doing that. And you can go back and you can see what was available during a particular time, what that curator liked, what the museum was able to acquire. And it gives you a historical thread that lets you go when somebody's trying to sell you a rock that says, oh, this is the best that ever came out. You can go, no, wait a minute. I've seen 3 better at Harvard, Smithsonian in London or in Paris.
Hey, Peter, I got a question coming in from, looks like an anonymous viewer from Bingen, Washington. And the viewer asks, if you were to describe your personality as a mineral specimen, parenthetically they say, and yes, you can go rock courier style here, what would you be?
Peter, can we see the question?
Yeah, my camera, this thing just blacked out on me for some reason.
Oh, sorry. Never mind.
No. Apparently my phone decided that I have been on for so long.
Oh, we got
it had to
There you are.
it had to cut itself off. So now you see an antique map of Eulalia behind me, and stock certificates. So what would I be? I'd be a secondary lead mineral, probably something like wolfenite or mimetite.
And for people who don't know, it is Peter's daughter who is in Bingen, Washington. That's Lauren Megaw, who actually sent in that question.
Peter, I have another question, and this is my own question, personal interest. You mentioned the similarities somehow with SMMP in terms of the oxidation zones at Santa Eulalia. Can you explain a little bit more what you mean and the different mineralogies so we can compare, try to make them up?
Okay, so you start off, both of those districts, and Ojuela was actually what I was talking about more than SMMP, just because there's more overlap in the primary mineralogy. But you start off with a vertical cylinder made of sulfides. So pyrite, sphalerite, galena, chalcopyrite, arsenopyrite, those are the major ingredients. And so that's what happens in what we call hypogene, which is genesis from below mineralization. So that's how the thing gets there in the first place. And then what we call supergene, which means genesis from above, processes begin to happen. So meteoric rainwater infiltrates into the top of these deposits and starts working its way down. And the chemistry of those fluids attacks the sulfide minerals, and it dissolves some of them. It generates acid, especially when you dissolve pyrite. And so you wind up with a fluid which becomes very aggressive in terms of attacking the primary sulfides. And some metals like zinc and copper are highly mobile, so they get flushed out. Things like lead and silver are not, so they stay behind and get enriched through having other things taken away. Sulfur tends to work its way, you can go out in the fluids as well. And these are deposits that these processes are going on for 30, 40 million years. And so you have climate change going on. You have wet cycles, dry cycles, glacial cycles, post-glacial cycles. All of these deposits have experienced that. And so you have different times where different amounts of these meteoric fluids are flushing through. They're responding to whatever the primary mineralogy was. In other words, the content of arsenic and things like that, and copper, which determine to a great extent what the colors are that you see. But because it's a vertical tube, everything sort of flushes down, stops, the next batch of fluid comes through, causes new reactions that are superimposed on the prior reactions. And this goes on and on and on for 30, 40 million years. The primary deposition happens within a few 100,000 years. So in many ways, the history of these deposits is much longer in terms of oxidation than it is compared to the primary formation of the deposit. So the more complex its history is, and the more superimposition that you get by flushing things within the same vertical channel, the more complex the mineralogy gets, the more interesting they become. And the more arsenic and copper you have, the more colors you get in the minerals.
Thank you, beautiful. We have another question. Eloise was mentioning. Eloise, you wanna go ahead?
It was Tony's question about your sulfides and sulfur salts. Do you have any problems with tarnishing or other alterations on your sulfides and sulfur salts, Peter?
Well, some of them are a problem for anybody anywhere. One of the beauties of living in Tucson is it's very dry. So we don't have a lot of humidity, which has a tendency to start that oxidation process. We do have, like everywhere else, there's automobile exhaust, which has some SO2 in it. So that has a tendency to react on the surface with silver minerals and develop secondary acanthite as a tarnish. That's usually fairly easy to remove. But much fewer problems in terms of humidity and bacterial action promoted by humidity in terms of attacking the sulfides and sulfosalts. Probably the biggest problem that I have is Eulalia is famous for pyrrhotite. It's probably the world's best pyrrhotite locality until Downlagorsk started bringing out dinner-sized plates. And what we've learned is that the thin, platy pyrrhotite tends to be unstable and break down over time, and the more prismatic, elongated crystals survive for, at least so far in my experience, 30 to 40 years without any serious alteration.
Okay, great. Thank you, Peter. Brian, should we move on to the last part, really last part, the 2 minutes thingy that we do?
Absolutely, Eloise. Thank you very much. Peter, we're going to go into the lightning round. This is known as your Know Your Peter Megaw segment. And so, Peter, I'm going to read you 10 questions. There are going to be 2 choices for each question. And just rapid fire, you've got to give us your answer, which resonates with you best. And we've put this out as a poll to all the viewers. And so they've answered. And if they can match 7 or more of your answers, then everyone viewing is going to get a special prize. So
gets my voice on their
even
answer
if you
machine.
don't have a preference, you got to choose one. Are we clear on the rules here? Okay, here we go. Know Your Peter Megaw. Number 1, iPhone or Android?
Android.
Margarita or gin and tonic?
Margarita.
Convertible or hardtop?
Hardtop.
Cat or dog?
Dog.
Snow or sand?
Sand.
Barbecue or roast?
Barbecue.
Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars.
Day or night?
Yes.
Gotta pick one.
Day.
Day. Shorts or pants?
Shorts.
Shorts. And the most important, Frank Zappa or Frank Sinatra?
Frank Zappa.
Okay, that was obvious. Big Frank Zappa fan.
That was the gimme at the end.
That was the give. Yeah, that was the give me. Okay, so Eloise, Raquel, how are we doing? Let's go through the questions. Number 1, iPhone or Android?
So, okay, so Peter, can you manage to turn your camera back around so we can actually see your face?
Sure.
Okay, and now it would be more interesting to see your reactions than mine anyway, so.
Okay, I'm just looking for making that reverse symbol show up. There we go.
There you go. Okay. So people thought that you were most likely an iPhone person.
Oh, interesting. Margarita or gin and tonic?
People chose margarita, like you, Peter. Okay.
Ding, 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 ding. Convertible or hardtop?
50-50. Again, we have a 50-50.
50-50.
Why would somebody who has this kind of protection on top have convertible?
I think that's obvious. We're gonna give you that one. That'll be a hard top. Ding, ding, ding. Cat or dog?
Dog. People chose dog for Peter. Yes, so that's a good one as well.
Overwhelmingly dog. Snow or sand?
Sand. Yes.
I think that was obvious based on where Peter lives. Barbecue or roast?
People chose barbecue. Yep.
Right on. Star Wars or Star Trek? And honestly, I'm not even sure Peter understands the difference between the two. What did the audience say?
Star Trek.
Star Trek. Oh. Day or night?
They're trying to date me.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, day as well. So yeah. I think that episode Peter's short. So yeah,
And
short
Frank
is
Zappa
88%.
or Frank Sinatra? I know what the answer would be, but I'm more interested in what the percentiles were.
I think that people saw the Zappa artwork on your wall when you first began. So yes, people chose Zappa, definitely, yes.
That is 8 out of 10 viewers of Mineral Talks Live. You are the winners today. Yay. Okay, if we can go back to my camera.
That will happen very soon, Brian.
So I want to know who these 27% of people are who said Frank Sinatra.
Ooh, those people don't know they're Peter Megaw, but they do now. So I'm not sure if anybody knows this, but one of the things that Peter and his daughter Lauren have been doing ever since Lauren was not even tall enough to look into the display cases is they go around to all the different display cases at TGMS and they play a little game. They say, if we had a magic wand, which piece in this case would we like to have for our own? And they compare their answers and it provides a forum for them to talk about the displays and the different pieces. Well, as you know, both Lauren and Peter are new co-hosts of What's Hot in Tucson. So we got a chance to follow them around this year at the TGMS show as they went around and they chose their favorite pieces. That will come out in What's Hot in Tucson 2020 when it's released next month. But for those of you who are watching this program, you get a sneak peek of that right now. And if you go to this URL at the bottom of the page, mineralfilms.com/WHIT20 Megaws, you can watch that clip from this year's show. And so we're going to leave that up for a few seconds so that everybody can see it. And good. Okay. If you're not sure or if you missed that, then go ahead and mail us which we're going to leave open for a little bit more. But right now, we're going to close the show. I want to thank all of you for joining us. But even more, I want to thank you, Peter. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and spending the last little more than an hour with us.
Fue un gran placer, Brian. Cuídate y saludos y gracias a todos.
Muchas gracias. Con mucho gusto.
Muchas gracias, Peter. Thank you.
Hasta luego. Cuídales.
Thank you, Peter. Bye. And thank you all for joining. Thank you so much.
Thank you again. And remember, tune in next week. We're going to have another great show. Next week, we are talking with Thomas Bellacam. We're going to go back to France. And Thomas is the show organizer for the Sainte-Marie-aux-Mines show. So it's going to be very interesting to talk to them. They were the first of the big shows that had to cancel because of COVID-19. And so we're going to talk to him, learn a little bit about what went behind that decision and what they're doing to ramp up for 2021. So again, thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Take care.